The Rabbit and the Tortoise Reimagined. Deep in the heart of the whispering woods, where the trees whispered secrets and the rivers hummed melodies, lived two unlikely rivals, Swift, the fastest rabbit in the forest, and Granny Shell, an old yet wise tortoise. Their legendary race had been told for generations, but few knew the true story of what really happened that day. One morning, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold, the animals of the forest gathered at the clearing. Swift, the boastful rabbit, hopped onto a stump and declared, "I am the fastest creature in whispering woods. No one can beat me in a race." Granny Shell, basking in the warm sunlight, chuckled, "Speed is not everything, dear Swift. Sometimes wisdom wins the race." The animals gasped. Was Granny Shell challenging Swift? "Are you saying you can beat me?" Swift snickered. "I am saying that patience and perseverance matter," Granny Shell said with a twinkle in her eye. "Let's have a race and find out." The crowd erupted in excitement. A race between the slowest and the fastest? It was bound to be interesting. The great race was set for the next morning. The sun had barely risen when the forest gathered at the starting line. The elder owl, acting as referee, stretched his wings and hooted, "On your marks, get set, go!" Swift shot forward like an arrow, kicking up dust as he dashed ahead. Granny Shell took her first slow step. The other animals whispered among themselves. "This isn't even fair," sighed the fox. "She'll never make it," muttered the squirrel. But Granny Shell simply smiled and kept moving. By the time Swift reached the halfway point, he looked back and laughed. Granny Shell was a tiny speck in the distance. "This is too easy," Swift chuckled. "I could take a nap and still win." He spotted a shady tree and lay down, confident that his victory was certain. The cool breeze and the warm sun lulled him into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, Granny Shell kept walking, slow, steady, determined. Step by step, inch by inch, she moved forward. Hours passed. Swift snored under the tree, dreaming of victory. But suddenly, boom! A loud crack of thunder rolled through the forest. Dark clouds gathered and the wind howled. The animals gasped. A storm was coming. The rain began to pour, drenching the ground in thick mud. The racecourse became slippery, and Swift, awakened by the storm, scrambled to his feet. But as he tried to run, he found himself stuck in the mud. His powerful legs were useless as the thick earth clung to his fur. And then, through the rain, came Granny Shell. She had reached the muddy path, but unlike Swift, she was built for this. Her sturdy legs and tough shell helped her move steadily through the sludge. Swift struggled and slipped, but Granny Shell kept going, inch by step. The animals at the finish line gasped. Granny Shell was getting closer. Swift panicked. He kicked and flailed, finally freeing himself. He bolted toward the finish line, but it was too late. With one final step, Granny Shell crossed the finish line first. The crowd erupted in cheers. The old tortoise had won the race. Swift skidded to a halt, panting and muddy. He couldn't believe it. Granny Shell smiled kindly. "Speed is a gift, but patience and persistence will always win in the end." Swift, humbled, nodded. "I underestimated you, Granny Shell. I should have kept moving instead of wasting time." The animals cheered for the new champion, and from that day on, Swift and Granny Shell became unlikely friends. And so the legend of the great race lived on, not just as a story of speed, but of wisdom, determination, and learning from one's mistakes.